The average cost of living in our country is somewhere around $28,000 for a single person a year. An individual working under current minimum wage policies makes somewhere around $15,000 a year. So that's barely over half of what the government says is enough for your basic needs and just the cost of living in general. I have spoken to many people that suffer under the current minimum wage policies and think they simply just don't have enough, whether they're young and they're trying to go to school and help their parents out, or older and support a family and such. So this really affects people of all ages, but to us as students, it's a little bit more important. For the most part, most entry-level jobs are going to offer us minimum wage, and so we're the ones that are really going to see the effects of this. So today I'm here to ask that you all sign a petition and demanding that a minimum wage policy is put into place, and not just something to raise the minimum wage, but a policy that'll continuously keep itself in check and adjust itself based on what we need. We don't necessarily need to adjust or raise the minimum wage every so often. I feel like if there's a need for it, then we should do it. If there is no need for it, then it should stay where it is. So how many of you currently have a minimum wage job or did at some point? Yeah, most of us. As young people, we know plenty about this, but the problem, or one of the problems, is that this doesn't just affect us as young people. And as I mentioned before, there are older people who oftentimes have more bills, more expenses to cover than we do. And so they really have to suffer. A lot of us have our parents to rely on to kind of help us out when we need it, but not all of us are as fortunate. And the first question that we should ask ourselves is it enough? Are we currently making enough to sustain the proper living conditions, or at least minimal living conditions? An article titled "State's Minimum Wage Helping Millions of Workers" talks about a woman whose name is Rita, and she works 2 minimum wage jobs, and oftentimes she finds herself giving up some of her basic needs, or just struggling to make ends meet. She sometimes sacrifices bus fare to walk the 3 miles, and has to walk the 3 miles to work, just so she can cover her phone bill, her electric bill, any utilities, and her rent. So she says, I need to make a decision on whether to buy clothes, to pay my bills, or to pay my rent. So that's Rita. The second problem, or I guess second example, is that minimum wage has arguably been declining over time. Now, how many of you think, I know that there's pretty much 2 sides to this, whether you think you should raise the minimum wage or whether you think we shouldn't. But how many in here think that, regardless on what side you're on, does anybody think that we should lower the minimum wage? Okay, 1 person. Cool. So most people wouldn't say that we should lower the minimum wage. That's usually out of the question. But the fact of the matter is that it's arguably been declining over time. PBS tells us that, and the reason for this is because of inflation. Now, PBS tells us that if minimum wage were adjusted for inflation, the minimum wage of 1968 would be somewhere around $10.90 today. So just about $11, so that the minimum wage would stay the same. That's not increasing it at all. That's just to maintain the same standard of living of 1968. And then the third problem that we see has to do with the comparison. So a lot of times we compare ourselves to other countries to see where we stack up against them and where we stand, and to measure our progress. And so based on our GDP, our production, we should be, according to the website The Economist, we should be somewhere around $12 an hour. If the country has been progressing, then the employees, at least even at the very basic level, should see the effects of that success as well. So the biggest problem is that the policies that we have in place today, as I mentioned earlier, don't necessarily account for inflation and the cost of living. So I think that the most appropriate policies are ones that can monitor themselves, keep themselves in check, and so the opposition or any opposing view is going to say that the biggest point would be that raising the minimum wage would cause inflation. Now, between the years of 2007 and 2009, a 2-year span, we went from $5.15 to about $7.25. That was a $2 increase, more than a $2 increase in just 2 years. I don't remember seeing the cost of a gallon of milk going up dramatically in those 2 years. I don't remember seeing the prices going up very much in those 2 years, so that's what I would have to say to that. And the solution that I propose is to, again, something that keeps itself in check, a policy that we can put into place and don't have to keep monitoring, and we don't have to randomly decide when we need to increase the minimum wage, but more so a policy that says if the cost of living goes up, then minimum wage should go up. If inflation takes place, then minimum wage should go up. I'm not saying that the very bottom of the wage level, I guess you could say, should be able to support you and let you buy anything you want to, but at the very least it should provide that kind of basic standard of living, and it hasn't done so today, till today.